happy to. You're probably wondering why a 22-year-old from Belfast is standing here on quite a serious, contentious topic, really. So, is this the button yet? So I'll get just a wee bit about myself. I'm going to talk about our old terrorist Muslim. I was born in Belfast. I'm sure you can tell by the accent. I was born in '93, so I caught really the tail end, sort of the troubles, really. But, you know, some of the attitudes, especially from the English, really, when I came over, still there, really. I was born in a very political family. The picture, you might not be able to see it here, but on the bottom left is myself campaigning with my mum for the Good Friday Agreement, bring a peace process into Northern Ireland to try and unite Catholics and Protestants. I moved over to England, shamelessly to say I thought a career in the armed forces would be for me. It wasn't in the end, and I got out of that rather quickly, but moved over at 16, and that was my first experience of England, really. And then I was elected as Vice President of the Students' Union in March last year. So what has me, why am I so informed, really, on what I've said terrorism? And it's to do with my city, really. Belfast, we've experienced a sectarian divide for about 400 years now, really, if not more. And you get some really interesting sort of opinions out of a sectarian divide. And interestingly for me, growing up, really, the big thing that stuck in my mind was how my community, the Protestant community, really assimilated with Israel and the Israeli sort of plight, what's going on in the Middle East, and the nationalist side held sympathy with the Palestinians. As you can see, sort of the pictures there, some of the wall art and murals that Belfast is quite famous for, really. On the top right there, solidarity with prisoners of war on both sides, the Irish and sort of Palestinian side. And then you can see a street in Belfast, actually, there in the middle. UVF, Ulster Volunteer Force, paramilitary terrorist organisation flags flying side by side with Israeli flags, really. And the picture on the bottom right is where I'm from. That's in the east of the city. So the Good Friday Agreement, in my opinion, was a great way. The terrorists, well, some so-called terrorists or freedom fighters, walked free from jail through political dialogue and through talking to each other, really. So I'll tell you a short story, really, of discrimination, really, I experienced when I first sort of came to England. I mentioned I joined the army at 16. The day before I went for my selection process, the IRA drove past two soldiers in a place called Mazarine in County Antrim, and they gunned the two soldiers down with an Uzi from the car and murdered the takeaway driver as well, actually, because they were ordering some pizza. Now, when I first sort of met all my sort of English counterparts over there, the sort of atmosphere I received for even just having this accent was quite negative, really, and it was very much a case of, don't order pizza around this guy, with some of the comments that I got, obviously because the soldiers had been shot for that. So it's nothing compared to Islamophobia I've seen and some of my students have seen on campus, but for me that was a real sticking point. I'll never forget really how I felt. For me it wasn't until I opened my mouth that people heard I was from Northern Ireland and tried to label me as a terrorist or a terrorist sympathiser. But understand for Muslim students and Muslims living in the city, there's more of a physical sort of identity. And I know from speaking to students, I've seen that's the real fear they've got, that being labelled, for just walking down the street, really. So back onto the topic of terrorism. For a start, what is terrorism? I'm not going to go into long-fledged sort of debates or derivatives of what it is. I'm just going to tell you it's a noun. And like other nouns, it's been used for political advantage to sort of declare war on or to kind of have conflict over. So we've seen wars on terror, we've seen a war on drugs, we've seen a war on extremism, and you often hear the phrases, there's a war on freedom of speech. And you wonder why the rhetoric of that in the language. Terms like war. Humans were exceptionally motivated by the sort of concept of war, and that linguistically sort of resonates with us, in our heads. And when I say war, you might think, my side versus your side, or when you see war in the papers, it's enemy at the gates. Sort of collect your beliefs. It's my ideology against yours. Something that we sort of understand in Britain, I think, is in times of war, certain liberties are to be sacrificed, and sort of plays into how the media play it and politically. Liberties like your freedom of speech or liberties are being monitored by your government. We might feel, there's a war on terror going on. I don't mind the government's looking at my Facebook messages because it needs to be done. And usually when there's a war on a concept or a noun, for me, my ears perk up. I think there's a mind management game being played here, and I'm careful. So back on the real sort of topic of it and the image of terrorism over the years, prior to 9/11, British media, how was terrorism portrayed? It was very much a sort of distant Republican loyalist sort of threat. As you can see, the sort of Daily Mirror there, the IRA's coming for your royal family, it's stirring up, hatred, fear-mongering the population. And it continues, for all the other papers there. Post 9/11, through political gain, really, we've seen, sort of rise of Islamic, Islamic terrorism is the main buzzword. It's the flavour of the month, really, when it comes to terrorism in the media. Very privileged to be here with Reyes here. It was, a fantastic video we made, really, in response to the 1 in 5 British Muslims support jihad sentiment by the Sun. But I don't think we can deny that is the image, really, that we all have seen of terrorism over the recent years. But what is the true face of terrorism? No, I do apologise. I'm obviously not going to get every sort of terrorist group on the one slide. Microsoft PowerPoint is not big enough for it. But we go through the KKK, really, in the top right. No one sees the KKK as a representative of all Christians, but it is Christian terrorism. But they aren't being labelled, every day as being terrorists. The Taliban, fair enough, they are part of a terrorist organisation. It would be ignorant to say that there are no such things as Muslim terrorists do exist, but they're not the be-all and end-all, really, of all terrorism, and they're not that iconic image of terror. Anders Breivik, as Nick mentioned earlier, terrorist, due to the kind of Christian nature of it, not really played in the media as a terrorist, more as a mass murderer, really. It just shows how the media sort of favour and betray terrorism. The UVF there, as I saw the slides going through as we were having the break there, 700 body count really from that organisation, but Christians not really quite declared as terrorists as much. And the IRA, naturally, and the Jewish Defence League as well, really. And the Anti-Balaka, the Christian extremists in Eritrea that have killed and murdered Muslims and forcibly converted Muslims to Christianity. So what really shapes our view on terror? What is it that makes us think that person X is a terrorist and person Y is a freedom fighter or such like? And it's a seedy, I'm just going to read it off the screen. It's a seedy government relationships to the press, perpetuating wars on concepts and wars on nouns for political gain. Now you take that or leave it if you want. That's my view. I'll back down to the question now, are all Muslims terrorists? I probably should give a spoiler alert at the start, because it's obviously not, and I'm sure you all can read, but shamefully and unjustly, the actions of the minority have been used to demonise an entire religion. Terror doesn't have a religion or a physical presence, and that's why it's used as a noun, because it can be applied to anything. It has no or physical identity. For reasons of political gain and fear-mongering perpetuated by the media, Islam has been made to fit the role of enemy in the war on terror, and it can be fit to any noun. So mine was a lot shorter than the others, but I'd just like to thank you for listening. I feel very privileged to be given the chance to come and speak here today. Thank you very much.